Imagine for a moment with me that you are the average American citizen from 1950 to 1960. Take that in for a moment, think about what you'd wear, what you'd do, what you'd eat on a day-to-day basis, just how you'd go about living your life. Just marinate in that for a second, all right? Perfect. You are the exact candidate for mind control experimentation. Welcome into the 7th episode of the Negative Space Podcast. I am not a federal agent, but this is the only podcast where every single one of my Instagram followers is automatically in the top 1% of the coolest and hottest individuals on earth. Sorry, I don't make the rules. It just is what it is. It just is what it is. So you might as well go enroll in that prestigious group. The handle is at negativespace.pod, and subscribe here while you're at it. It really helps me out. It makes me feel like, okay, maybe I'm not wasting my time with this. And also, like the episodes that you like, and even if you don't like them anyway. That would be really great, because I have I'm pretty sure on average 2 monthly viewers. Wow. But the way I look at it is that if 2 people complimented me on an outfit I was wearing in one day, I would wear that all the time. I would wear it twice a week. So that's just the way I look at it. If 10 people said hey, I really liked that episode on whatever, my perspective is, okay, fit those 10 people in a room, seems like a lot more people than you realize. We really have our scales thrown off by some of the larger individuals, not physically large, but larger content creators on any platform, really. Full transparency, this is the 3rd time I'm recording this, because the first time it just sucked. The second time, I might throw it in at the end here. My computer just died while plugged in the middle of recording. It was really strange. I think the CIA may be onto me, because today we are talking about MKUltra. That is right, mind control experimentation, funded by the federal government and performed by these Central Intelligence. I forget. How did I forget what CIA stands for? Oh my gosh, I have to look this up live. What? Central Intelligence Association. I think. What does CIA stand for? This is a great start to the podcast, everybody. Aren't you so happy that you turned in? Central Intelligence Agency. Why did I think association? You can just tell that I'm going to be all over the place on this one. So buckle up, because we've got a lot to get to. I was originally sitting here with a nice kombucha and a thing full of grapes, because I'm hunkering down for this episode. But no, we're just going in, I was going to say cold turkey, but that's not really what that means. We're just going in. We're just, we're jumping in. We are cannonballing in this pool. Now, before I really talk about the government and their attempts at mind control and, kidnapping innocent American and Canadian civilians, first I need to rant about something. This is just what we do on this podcast. I usually spend the first 10 or so minutes. And what I had written before is, I'll just give you the skinny of it, because I've got something else that I want to rant about that I think I can kind of tie in on the fly. The first thing I was going to talk about is, if you don't put the shopping cart back at the store, you are a communist, because you're expecting an overarching body to take care of things for you. You're trading away your liberty for safety or whatever, and just being a slob. That's what collectivism at a large scale is all about, pretty much. So just put the freaking shopping cart away to prove that you can govern yourself. Really? That is it that hard? No, it's not. So please just do it. The second thing I'm gonna rant about, and I don't have anything written down for this. This is just on the fly. This is something I've been stewing over and it's so dumb. It's really dumb, but I've been stewing over it anyway. And maybe one person who ever listens to this episode is gonna really get what I'm talking about. But, oh my gosh, I am so frustrated at the state of metalcore. Now, most of you don't know what I'm talking about. What is metalcore? What are you talking about? Okay, so I'm a fan. I'm a heavy music fella. Okay, it's honestly, well, my mom put me on. She kind of like got me started down that path, funnily enough. But it's like big in hockey circles, and I'm a hockey guy, and it just, I don't know. A lot of bands always kind of had music and messages that spoke to me in different ways, and some of these albums that I really love, you can just sort of, if you just close your eyes and listen to them, you can just sort of feel them. One of the ones I was listening to earlier today, and I just recently got into them, is Obsidian by Northlane. As I record this, they are dropping a new album tomorrow, which I'm excited about. But Obsidian by Northlane is really cool because it not only does it take metalcore, which is already a combination of metal riffs and like the rest of it coming from like taking inspiration from hardcore punk, but it's evolved over time. But it takes that and it combines it with like some of the songs are almost like metalcore versions of like EDM songs, like club songs that are sort of repetitive and get you in a groove. It's just a fantastic album. But most of metalcore these days isn't that. And I know you didn't expect to come in here and listen to me rant about my frustrations with the scene, but it just is what it is because it's on my mind and I need to warm up a little bit, okay? I haven't done this in so long. But oh my gosh, every band sounds like Wage War. Wage War is like industry plant core if I've ever seen it in my life. Frankly, I think it was just like someone some disgruntled Victory Records employee who's like, how are we going to take down A Day to Remember, who took us down because we were horrible towards them? So they're like, okay, we'll bring up another band kind of in their same realm from their same town, and we're going to ruin this genre. Really. Now, I know there are a lot of people who like Wage War, and if you listen to this and you like Wage War, you maybe think, why is Wage War catching strays? Well, they're really just the first band I associate in my head with this. Like, Manic was not a good album. I'm just sorry. Manic wasn't a great album. Pressure was really not a good album. Their album Pressure was the exemplary I don't know if I'm really saying it is the perfect example of this, where where these bands take like old Architects riffs and then Linkin Park choruses and they mash them together and say, "Yep, that's the genre now." And it's like what are we doing here? Why are we not trying to grow at all? Why are we not trying to expand this? And this is something that you see in music all over now. It seems like a lot of bands and artists are becoming stale because they stick in one exact frame of mind when recording music, and it's gotten even worse with TikTok, the proliferation of short form content, where you can get a hit, you can have a hit song, a Billboard topper, by just having 30 seconds that are written in a catchy way. And the rest of it can be crap. The rest of it can be mindless slop. And honestly, I feel like that's infecting genres that were always meant to be progressive and innovative. Metalcore was not always a thing. Metalcore really started in the 90s and didn't take off until the 2000s, when a lot of the bands I really love and are getting destroyed by this really came up. A lot of these bands, Christian bands, which I think is awesome, because you always have the just general public perception of any sort of heavy music being naturally satanic, which it's just not the case anymore. It's certainly not the case. Look up at Kingdom Core on Instagram. You find a new Christian metalcore band or hardcore band every day, and it's awesome. It's awesome. I found so many great albums that aren't like what I'm about to just... they're not like what I've been talking about, but unfortunately bands like Fit for a King, I love you so much, but why did you release a song that sounds like Keeping Secrets? Why? It's the same generic metalcore garbage that has been coming out since like 2019, and it all sounds the same, and I'm tired of hearing the same lyrics about how you're either I'm fighting my demons and they show up when I sleep. Like, even the Christian bands are writing songs that sound just like that. Either that or they're like, oh, I can't get over her. Get over yourself, Bob. Please get over yourself and write some good music again. Oh my gosh. Really, if we get bands like Fit for a King or like Norma Jean or The Devil Wears Prada or even Under Oath, I know they're no longer Christian, but if Under Oath can get back to writing songs that sounded like they were from 2010 again, and they were a little creative and they weren't afraid to be crabcore, because I know crabcore got crapped on, but honestly, Stick Stickly by Attack Attack holds up to this day. It should... It's really kind of funny. These dudes were like, and all of them are in their own bands now. Like Johnny Frank has Bill Murray, Caleb Shomo has Beartooth, but a lot of these dudes are in their own bands now. But when they're like 16, they're like, hey, this genre that's coming up right now, metalcore. What if we added in EDM, but not quite in a polished way like North Lane does it, but like in a really kind of rough around the edges way, and we make this music video where we look totally ridiculous. And they did it, and it was awesome. And this song, the lyrics still hold up to this day. It sounds crazy and you don't get it, but they basically brought the gospel to a bunch of scene kids in 2009. Like, what more can you ask for? This is really a pointless rant, but the way I'm going to try to tie it into MKUltra is that the repetition is almost like conditioning listeners to just accept that this is what it is now. And that was sort of happened in some of these MKUltra experiments. Oh my gosh, now I got that out of my system. And you know what? Actually, no, I'm not done yet, because I am going to stand on business. I'm going to stand on business for You're Welcome by A Day to Remember. I love this album. I hated it at first, but I love it now because God forbid a band in the scene decide, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to explore a little bit with this album. We're going to branch out a little bit, and we're going to take these other sounds and adopt it into our own sound. These guys, they wrote a song that has it's like metalcore, and then it's hardcore, and then it's like grunge, and then it's like punk, and then it's just like all these different things, and they have like alt pop rock, and then they've got a song that sounds like their normal selves, and they got a song that sounds like their heavier sound, and then they've got like a Tom Petty song about winning the jackpot, and then they got a beach rock song. Like, they're all over the place, and it's great because it's not stale. It's not stale like every album since Wage War dropped Pressure. Honestly, that's what it was, because it was a commercial success and bands were like, okay, well, we want to make money. And then everything just sucked. Everything just sucked. Oh my gosh. Okay. I need to calm down now. I need to calm down now, but that has been something that has been annoying me for so long. And I can't even listen to We Came as Romans anymore, because their most recent album in 2020 sounded like this. And there's some bands that are still hanging on, like the aforementioned A Day to Remember, and Poppy. She was never really metalcore, but she's very expansive in her taste and in her sound, and it's awesome to hear. And Bring Me the Horizon, I'm not a big Bring Me the Horizon guy, because they are one of those bands that you could definitely point to and say, okay, they're outrightly satanic. I listened to them a little bit back in the day, but after I realized, oh wow, I stopped listening to them, and just that sort of stuff. But there are a lot of great bands who are trying to expand their sound and push the genre forward. And shout out to August Burns Red, who have had the same sound that's not generic garbage, but is actually unique and interesting every time. Shout out August Burns Red, another one of the big Christian bands. Shout out Holy Name, love Holy Name, just bought a shirt from them. Seriously, go check out Tommy Green. He's the lead singer and I guess main songwriter. Go check out his work with Run Against Traffic. It took me forever to realize Run Against Traffic and how clever that name is, but it's his nonprofit that he runs that works on providing aftercare for victims of sex trafficking. Go check out him, donate, give what you can to his organization, because that's great. And if you're interested in any sort of heavy music, go check out his current band, Holy Name, and then he was in a band a while ago called Sleeping Giant, which was more hardcore than metalcore, but fantastic, like really, really, really good hardcore, and all just like, good, clean Christian messages. I love it. I love it. Some people think it's corny, whatever. I don't care. I love it. I'm gonna listen to my preach core. Okay, now let's talk about MKUltra. I was going to try to tie that in, but I just couldn't. I really couldn't. I couldn't artfully on the fly. It's just the same old thing, and it's like the whole fan, every fan in the genre is being conditioned to accept garbage. But let's talk about MKUltra. All right, let's actually get into this. Now, most of this isn't conspiracy. Okay, I will interject my own theories at the end, but most of this is from declassified documents, at least the ones that weren't destroyed during certain court hearings about all this. But let's start off with what the name MKUltra means, where it comes from. All right. So the CIA has this system of this naming convention. They call these names cryptograms, and MKUltra is kind of like is a great example of this. So the MK, actually no, the name MKUltra itself isn't a great example because that's sort of the umbrella project. We'll take like MK Delta. Okay, the MK stands for mind control, but control is spelled with a K, like it would be in German. And then Delta is like the specific operation within the entire project. Okay. So MKUltra was the overarching name, but it's like the highest level of this entire organization of projects that are all mind control based. It took me so long to get to this point while ranting about something that the average listener of this podcast isn't gonna care about. And it's not even related to anything I normally talk. And anyway, whatever. I don't care. It's my podcast. I can talk about what I want to. And I'm going to be talking about this for so long. Now, this is a really long podcast episode. I got like halfway through last night, and it was already close to 45 minutes. But we're recording now. We're 20 minutes in, and it's going to be even longer because my rant about my music opinions that no one cares about was longer. So MKUltra, this series of operations, just the MK projects in general, they really got their start during the Cold War. The entire shebang kicked off with Operation Artichoke, which we'll break down in a minute. But Artichoke was inspired by, I believe, there was this incident where a Russian spy that nobody knew was a Russian spy had this umbrella that was really an injection gun, and inside the injection gun part of the umbrella was ricin. And so what he did is he came across this OSS operative. The CIA was formerly the OSS, the Operation of Strategic Services, and he pretended to accidentally, tap him in the leg with this injection gun. And he did, and the dude died. The CIA agent died 4 days later because he was poisoned. So the CIA was like, okay, well, the Russians have this huge espionage program. We got to get in on it. And there were rumors that the Russians were messing with specifically mind control espionage. So this is where Operation Artichoke comes in. Operation Artichoke, it was sort of in conjunction with Project Bluebird. They're really considered one and the same under MKUltra, but they started kind of at different times and were both mind control experimentation, but weren't necessarily related at first. But then once MKUltra came in, they fit under the same umbrella. Whatever. Artichoke started as this, first of all, dastardly government operation to try to see if you could hypnotize a person into committing an assassination without them even realizing it, because once they come to, everything that happened is blocked behind an amnesia wall inside their mind. So how it would happen is the subject would be hypnotized and given some sort of sleeper phrase or object to focus on while in a state of hypnosis. When they would come out of hypnosis, when they would come out of trance, back into the real world, if someone told them this specific phrase or they saw this specific object, they would immediately take action against their target. And when they were all done, they would not remember a thing. So, like, if I hypnotized you and said your sleeper code is, blueberry muffin folding chair, and you woke up and you were just going about your daily business and, you were going to the grocery store, like, I don't know, maybe this podcast influenced you to go to Aldi, and you pop in your quarter in the cart and you grab it and you go around and you say, wow, that's a great deal on oranges. And I go up to you and I look you straight in the eye and I say, blueberry muffin folding chair. That means you're going to take out the switchblade that I planted in your back pocket and you're going to go stab the nearest, I don't know, I was going to say a specific ethnicity, but I don't want to. And also, anyone listening, manual YouTube reviewer, I don't know, this is not a threat, I'm just giving a comical example. Please don't take this down, please do not investigate. This is just a joke. This entire thing is a joke. This is post-ironic humor. That is not that's not a threat, okay? Anyway, that's kind of the gist of it. Now, subjects of this experimentation and all mind control experimentation would come to be known as Manchurian candidates. And there was actually a lot of media made about this. At first, there was a book written in 1959, and then a movie made in 1962, and then a remake of said movie in 2004. However, I'm not sure if these pieces told the whole story, or if there's some sort of predictive programming, like I mentioned in the previous PSYOP episode. Predictive programming is when some stories or events are just too big and too impactful to be released into the public. So to acclimate the average person to said truth, sometimes it's written in fiction and dispersed throughout the public so people can gradually accept it as a potential reality, and then it can be revealed and it's not as mind-altering or reality-shifting to the average individual. Now, this obviously has its pros and cons, and I look at it as mainly a net negative. And that could really be the case with the movie Manchurian Candidate. However, with all this, they never really, I don't think, got this down, but there were some traces of success. We'll get to one of them in a little bit, a story of Operation Artichoke and just mind control in general gone wrong. But, I don't know, maybe you could go into the fringes of like, hey, the JFK assassination, and also how two of the people in Dallas at the time were also two individuals caught during Watergate. Or maybe, I don't know, other more, I guess, fringe speculative cases, like maybe the dude who killed John Benet Ramsey was like an Operation Artichoke failure. That was a bit later, but as I'll mention again in a little bit, we know that a lot of these MKUltra testings are still happening in like Guantanamo Bay at the very least. So these could be continuous, throughout the world, and people, unwitting citizens, could still be, under some of these experiments, and we just don't know about it. But that's something we're going to get to in a minute. Now, abroad, you can really see how Manchurian candidates would be incredibly helpful. Apparently, the intention during the Korean War was to send Chinese Manchurian candidates, American Chinese Manchurian candidates, back to communist China. And while they were there, they would, commit acts of terrorism or assassination. And then, should they be captured, no matter how much torture they underwent, they genuinely would not be able to remember what they did, why they did it, or who set them up. Like, that's scary. That's scary, from any perspective, really. And similar disinformation campaigns were started to say that this testing was beneficial to the United States. Should U.S. soldiers be captured, their hypnotic amnesia would block out the goals of their mission and other critical information that would help enemies of the United States should they get their hands on it. However, while this could have been the case, this was not how any mind control experimentation was used at all. Now, keep in mind as we go over some of these things that these obviously breach all sorts of ethical boundaries, but also lawful boundaries, okay? Like the Nuremberg Code, which states that first, patients must give consent to medical testing. The testing must yield a net good for society, and the experiment should be so conducted as to avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering and injury. Those are just 3 of the 10 points that the government broke in every possible way during this time. Now, where did we get the Nuremberg Code? Well, it came after we discovered the Nazi death camps. So the CIA was breaking all these laws that were given to us because the Nazis broke them. Okay, so I hope that puts into context how bad some of this really was. Now, I'm going to try to keep it a little lighthearted as we do on this show, because, look, if I'm going to live in a clown world, I want to laugh at it, okay? I'm fine with bad things happening as long as funny stuff happening. I mean, not really, but like what I said before, clown world, I want to laugh at it. Now let's talk about the CIA's involvement with LSD and other drugs that would become synonymous with the hippie movement of the 1960s, because of course those are connected. Why wouldn't they be? In 1952, when the CIA was still the OSS, a man named George White worked with the Truth Drug Committee at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. They'd test mescaline, scopolamine, and marijuana unbeknownst to these test subjects. There was no real lead with any of those, but they weren't shaken. What they were trying to do is find some sort of truth serum, so if they captured, say, an opposing soldier, and they were a POW, they could inject them with it and get the truth that they wanted out. Now, most of the time, this is what girlfriends in toxic relationships do, just with buying their boyfriends beers. Oh, wow, that kind of sucks. But it's the truth. It's the truth. I've seen it with my own eyes, okay? In 1952, not that I was said guy in relationship. I've just seen other people go through it. Okay, I felt the need to clarify that, but I'm just going off the rails, all right? In 1952, I already read that. I'm getting lost in my own script. A memo from this time, in 1952, I should say, outlined that their goal was, and I quote, controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will. And this was really the start of MKUltra. So obviously no lead with some of these other drugs, but then certain events in a Swiss laboratory happened. And for the CIA, this was the jackpot. Like I mentioned before, the CIA was very interested in LSD and wanted to make sure that the Russians didn't get their hands on it. They really couldn't prove that the Russians wanted to at all. In fact, there's this interview that I saw with this former CIA operative who was like, yeah, we really wanted to get the CIA so the Russians didn't. No, there was no evidence to it, but we really felt like they wanted to. Okay, I guess. It's source, trust me, bro. Great job, CIA. These are the people protecting us, and we pay taxes to give them jobs. That's so cool. Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland. This is where LSD was created. You know, LSD wasn't just like, no one set out to go create LSD. It was created on accident. Dr. Albert Hoffman, this Swiss scientist, he was researching the medicinal value of lysergic acid for migraines, but he created LSD, and took said drug and had the first accidental trip, and probably the worst trip of all time, really, considering it was the first one, and he had no idea that this was going to happen. Oh my gosh, imagine you're working on a cure to migraines and you start smelling color. That's basically what this was. They were going to put out allegedly 100 million doses of LSD on the open market. Sandoz Laboratories was, excuse me. And the U.S.'s response to this was to prepare to buy the entire supply. However, and this is probably the funniest part of all of this, there was a bit of a calculation mistake. See, a U.S. officer in Switzerland mixed up milligrams with kilograms. You know, we don't use the metric system. We use the imperial. And this is probably why, to this day, meaning he thought that 1/1000th of a gram was the same as 1,000 grams. Meaning he thought there would be 1,000,000 times more LSD than there actually was. Oh my gosh. However, they really still wanted to get their grubby little mitts on this powerful substance and were going to do what they had to. So naturally, they looked to the private sector. They contracted Eli Lilly Company, the creators of Prozac, which, and this is not coincidence, like LSD, works on your serotonin system, to manufacture, at the time, $400,000 worth of the hallucinogen. Now, I'm actually going to look this up. I should have written it down. How much was $4,000 in 1960? 1 second. I'm doing the pod on the pod. Was $4,000 in 1960. I just set my mic down, so you probably really heard the click in there. Amount 400,000 in 1960, not 1660. What? Oh my gosh, it's over $4 million. So today the government spent $4 million on LSD. Good gravy. Oh my goodness. So this would lead to Dr. Timothy Leary, who was a psychiatrist during the time, making the claim that the CIA directly funded and encouraged hundreds of young psychiatrists across the country to test LSD as a potential consciousness-enhancing drug on their patients. The fallout of this would be some of these psychiatrists trying it themselves, which led to the proliferation of LSD as a sort of spiritual awakening, and the counterculture hippie movement that would become closely associated with all sorts of different drugs. You know, whether or not this was intentional is really unclear, but between you and me, I would not be surprised if they were like, hey, we didn't mean to, but added bonus. The Army Chemical Corps, which, by the way, if you go to a service academy and you are assigned Chemical Corps, I'm sorry, I hear that's awful. They would later have to release a document showing that they tested 125 different drugs during MKUltra experimentation. Most of them were variations of LSD, other hallucinogens. And they even went to Mexico to find what was legendary at the time, magic mushrooms. We know about them today, and they spoke with a shaman who used them to have all sorts of visions and prophesy and all that sort of things. And the CIA kept it a secret until they probably, as they did with cocaine, dropped it off in some minority community to get them hooked and on government programs. I mean, I don't know. But at this point in the timeline, what would ordinarily be called artichoke or bluebird, they became, they went under the MK umbrella. I wanted to put this as sort of a precursor to this segment about the proliferation of MKUltra experiments. Not all of them would explicitly use hallucinogens or anything, or, even really drugs at all, but it was still, all too common. Now, there were 149 total MKUltra sub-projects, and they tested with a variation, a bunch of different drugs, everything from, LSD to over caffeinating people. And of these 149 projects, 6 of them were on unwitting American citizens. Now, that doesn't sound like a horrible ratio, 6 to 149, except these projects, these 6 were massive, and the other tests were done on volunteer military personnel or convicted felons, people serving life sentences most of the time. The rest of it were either American citizens or prisoners who didn't know that they were being tested, which is just ridiculous. Why they felt that they had to go out and test on the average person when you had people volunteering to do this is beyond me. But, oh my gosh, you can't stop the snake from killing the frog. The first plan when testing it on people, on non-volunteers, I should say, was to do it on people on the fringes of society. They determined, although they knew it was wrong, that this would be, these would have the least consequences should they get found out. So this is oh my gosh. This is kind of crazy. So the aforementioned George White, who worked on the Truth Drug Committee, he was a man known to bend the law and get away with it. In CIA circles, he's basically considered legend status, and he knew all the pimps, prostitutes, addicts, and assorted miscreants, really. This brings us to Operation Midnight Climax, and you're going to see in a minute why this is such a kind of a funny name, and if they're going to ruin people's lives, at least they're going to have fun with it. White and his posse would set up CIA safe houses in New York, at Plantation Inn Motel in San Francisco, and in an apartment on Telegraph Hill, also in San Francisco. So these safe houses, and this is why this is a euphemism and sounds like something Michael Scott would come up with, this would be where they would get hookers to meet different solicitors, and they'd test how sexual behavior would affect someone's proclivity to reveal private information. Now, if you've ever seen like a dude comment on some woman's Instagram post, "Nice try, Fed, I'm still not paying my taxes," there is actually good precedent for that. This has happened before. George White decided that he was going to hire these prostitutes to go into bars, pick up guys, bring them back to the safe house, dance their tango, and then slip them LSD so the feds could observe their behavior through a one-way mirror. And then the hookers would go in and try to, after they turned their trick, try to get information out of this. And what's even creepier about this whole thing is that not only were there people watching behind a one-way mirror, but also George White would record what was going on in there, and then later used to blackmail these individuals. Like, blackmailing them was bad enough. All this was bad enough, but why did he have to record it? Like, dog, come on, man. That's like 11 on the 1 to 10 creepy scale. But the documents for Operation Midnight Climax, they say that the purpose of this was to examine the results of an unwitting dose of LSD under conditions that mimic a field interrogation. Hold on to that for 1 second. Now, these victims were obviously completely powerless to fight back. Not only were they recorded by George White, and they were illegally soliciting women, but this gets even stranger, because the men weren't the only victims here. This was also a test of the prostitutes. The prostitutes were also being drugged up sometimes. They were running them through these simulations, turning a trick, trying to pry information out of these men. And sometimes it would be so brutal and so devastating just to go through one of these cycles that their brain would split. And this Jekyll and Hyde effect would happen, where their brain would split into multiple personalities. And this is kind of what the CIA was going for. So you could have one personality to go out and carry out, say, an assassination, And then that personality goes away when you're out of the trance and is blocked by the amnesia wall. That was really the point of some of this torture and different tests run by the government. This is the effect that they wanted to have. So really, what this means is that the government was trying. They were trying to create government weaponized tramps, really. They were trying to create these prostitutes into CIA operatives. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazier than getting minority communities hooked on cocaine so they end up on government assistance. Oh my gosh. Whew. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, these people would just get released back into the wild, and if they went crazy, nobody would know it was the CIA's fault. And it's almost like creating a virus and then releasing it into the public to study the effects and the social ramifications of it, and telling everyone to put this piece of cloth on your face that really doesn't do anything, and we have the evidence to prove that now. But anyway, they would also test on convicted sex offenders. They would drug them up. They'd give them all sorts of drugs, and they basically tried to get them to admit to crimes that they had never committed. Really just a way for the CIA to test how far they could push the human will under extreme amounts of torture. And I'm sure there was a lot of this mind snapping that happened with these sex offenders too. And they're already in prison, so I guess it's safer, they're convicted sex offenders, they've already done horrible things, but they still didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what they were signing up for. Oh my gosh. Eventually, though, they just couldn't help themselves. They wanted to stop testing on people just on the fringes. And what they would do is they kind of set up shell companies, and they would pay different militias and different other companies and different universities as cover for the true nature of some of these tests. And at the root of all of this really was a man named Jolly West. Now let's go to July 4th of 1954. A 3-year-old girl went missing from the parking lot of a bar near midnight. Her family had gone to the bar at that hour during a heat wave when nobody could sleep, and they just wanted to try to get some food, some cold water, and relax while they had the opportunity. The parents let their 2 children play in the parking lot, but unfortunately, their daughter would go missing. A search party was organized, and they would come across a completely marred Jimmy Shaver. Jimmy was an airman and was found completely scratched up, bloodied, bruised, shirtless, and totally unaware of how he got to that point. They would then discover the body of the girl not too far from where they found Jimmy. On top of the amnesia to this event, Jimmy had no history of violence. He had several children himself and was a well-respected flight instructor. Those who encountered him that night described him as being in a trance, and alcohol tests proved that he was completely sober. So now, how did Jimmy get into this mess? He had a psychiatrist, the fella who he saw in preparation for flight trials. You guessed it, Dr. Jolly West. Jolly West's crowning achievement was killing an elephant by giving it a bunch of LSD. Really, look it up. He did that, I believe, in an Oklahoma City zoo. I think it was Oklahoma City. Now, Jolly West, and yes, I'm going to keep on calling him that because that's hilarious and ridiculous, and he deserves to be, deserves to be slandered for what he did. He saw Jimmy frequently at Laughlin Air Force Base, and he would conduct experimental treatments on him for Jimmy's severe migraines. Jimmy probably underwent a bunch of concussions back when we didn't really know much about concussions, and they were catching up to him in the form of migraines. That's happened to a few of my family members, and it sucks. So he was probably desperate enough to try whatever was out there. Now, if you remember, how was LSD created? It was created by trying to find a solution for chronic migraines. Now, everything that we talked about so far, the government buying all this LSD and military funding and all these things, this all starts to make a lot of sense. The exact experiments that would happen, we don't really know, because Jimmy was just never able to testify in the several trials conducted to get to the bottom of this. Jolly West, however, decided to insert him into this case, and then using sodium pentothal, or what we colloquially call now as truth serum, he would get Jimmy to admit to the murder. Not of his own volition, though, acting as an agent in an MKUltra blunder. Now, we don't even know if Jimmy actually was admitting to this because he actually did it, or if this was like the tests they conducted on sex offenders, where they drugged them up and tried to get them to admit to murders that they had never committed. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. The government gave money to many organizations over the course of this time, and sometimes without telling them what it was really for, too, all to test on unwitting American and Canadian citizens. Patty Hearst is one example. We'll go through her story quickly, but she was in her apartment with her boyfriend when she was kidnapped by the Siamese Liberation Army. They entered in their home, guns blazing. They were shooting and causing a ruckus. They threw her in the trunk of a car and brought her to a safe house. She would be locked in a closet for 45 days, and she would be routinely sexually abused, all sorts of horrible things that no one should ever have to go through. She was beaten and feared for her life constantly because they would run mock FBI raids on the site, and she was afraid that she was just going to get shot during one of these things. So not only the horrific physical torture and psychological torture, but being locked in that closet with no light, presumably, that was extreme sensory deprivation and isolation. So that caused the brain split moment in Patty. She would later be found attempting a bank robbery under the name Tanya. It was sort of the result of her brain split. She went crazy. She went off the rails. I don't think she ever became any sort of CIA operative, but we know that they were able to traumatize her into creating this brain split event. And even if you go back to my episode, I don't remember which one it was, you'll have to find it, about Hollywood and some of the crazy things that go on there, and what Kanye West has talked about, and how there's this group trying to intentionally traumatize individuals so they're easier to control. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that this was the beginning, and then different groups who want control over other people of influence said, hey, look at how this has happened in the past. You think we could maybe not control their minds, but get them to a point of total dependency on us, otherwise they go insane like Britney Spears? Maybe. It makes a lot of sense. Now, Jack Ruby, you might know him because he was the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald, who was the fall guy for the JFK assassination. Jack Ruby was a patient of Jolly West. He underwent all sorts of experimentation as well. Whether or not he was a volunteer or not, I'm not too sure, but we know he was tested on by Jolly West, probably given a bunch of LSD, and had this brain split moment. Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, underwent MKUltra experimentation while at Harvard. In fact, a myriad of universities were involved in MKUltra experiments, knowingly or not, and received state funding for it. So this is where some of these shell corporations come in. I'd say shell corporations is probably not the proper term for what they are, but you kind of get the idea based off of how that term's been used elsewhere. They set up these fake companies that would give these universities money, saying, hey, do this study for us. And they wouldn't know that it was military funded, and so they just went along with it. So some of the 80 universities mentioned in declassified documents are, so you see that these are no small schools: Harvard, MIT, Florida, Cornell, McGill, Denver, Johns Hopkins, and Columbia. These schools were some of the 80 that participated, knowingly or not, in MKUltra experimentation. Now, Kaczynski's tests there were a little different. They weren't trying to drug him up, but you kind of see hints of how they were moving along in this process. So, the tests at Harvard were run by a former OSS officer, Henry Murray, who received CIA funding to conduct these tests, where Murray's team, they bullied, harassed, and tried to psychologically break down the students, the participants in this class. So they would have the students like write up essays and debate other students on the subject of different life philosophies, and then they would be hooked up to electrode readers to gauge their reactions. But they would often be, berated and belittled for their ideas, calling them dumb and stupid, and like this would never work, and all sorts of horrible things. Like really just trying to break them down with words. And good old Teddy K did this for 3 years, once a week. So that's a lot of time being basically psychologically tortured, and you have no idea why. Now, Kaczynski would claim that this had no impact over the course of his life, but really that's what victims are supposed to say after they're done with MKUltra testing, like the amnesia wall. But his lawyers like really harped on the fact, like, hey, we're pleading insanity because he underwent this experimentation run by our own government. And it makes sense, really. Oh my gosh. Now, there's one woman who worked at one of these universities. She rushed to the emergency room, describing how her boss made her sit in a room full of leaves and gave her a bunch of drugs, and she had a bad trip, and that's why she was there. Now, they just kind of treated her like, okay, this woman is insane. She's obviously on drugs, but none of this actually happened until we have photographic evidence of this. The Ames Leaf Room. This was a test conducted where you would sit the individual down and have isoconic lenses strapped onto their head, which are glasses that basically seriously distort the angles in your vision, almost like drunk goggles, I think, but probably a lot stronger. And you'd be given 2 levers to move. And as you move the levers, a white bar in front of you moves too. And you're supposed to align the white bar perfectly horizontally while wearing these glasses and tripping mad balls. In fact, 9 people sued the CIA for their involvements in tests while at McGill, and the CIA settled out of court. These ones involve electroshock therapy, and the results of that on a person is akin to something that we are going to get to in a moment. The story of a child undergoing some of these experimentations. It's really dark. So viewer discretion advised for the future, in like a few lines actually. But at McGill, in particular in Montreal, as a Canadian encyclopedia puts it, the experiment's purpose was originally and officially listed as an effort to find a cure for schizophrenia. However, in reality, the project conducted illegal human experimentation to determine whether drugs and psychological techniques could be used for the purposes of mind control. Officially, neither the United States nor Canada has admitted to being responsible for these experiments. It basically ended with a bunch of Canadian social patients being dead by suicide or overdose. A few of them just jumped off of the walls of the building, and a bunch of them accidentally took too much LSD and it killed them. That's crazy. Now, this is where, although I want to be lighthearted, this is kind of tough to think about, because this is a story of this one. This is, I don't know how to really explain this story, but viewer discretion is advised because we're talking about the torture of a child undergoing some of these tests. This is a good kind of peek behind the curtain as to some of the really, really horrible torture methods that were used during this time, because this wasn't just drugging people up and seeing if they could use it to manipulate their minds. They were torturing people to the extremes to create this mind split, to see if that created any room for them to get in there and control these people. So Victor Marx, he had he did this interview, and it's crazy and heartbreaking to hear. He talked about his experiences being the stepson of a U.S. Army counterintelligence operative during the time that a lot of these tests were being conducted. In particular, his story of being a victim as a child has interesting stories. Being a victim as a child, I should emphasize, has interesting ties elsewhere, and I'm sure that you can guess as to where as we go along. Now, Victor never said that he would never say that he really considers himself an outright victim of MKUltra, or I guess Bluebird at the time, but we know that the tests he was put through, whether they were for to try to see how young you could really do this, or how young you could start and doing these things or not, whether or not that was an official government test, we know that a lot of these things did happen to victims of Bluebird. So Victor states that as a child, his earliest memory was being tied to a bed at about 3.5 years old, and he had one arm free and the other one tied down, and his stepfather entered the room with a dead cat and told him that if he didn't cut off the head of that dead animal, his stepfather would cut his head off. Now, this is where he thinks his brain first split as a child, because obviously that would be incredibly traumatic for anybody, but particularly as a child, when you can hardly understand, the world around you. You can hardly understand your own house, and how do you begin to even process having to cut off the head of a dead animal? He remembers the body of the cat after he did it, being placed on his head. He had blood dripping down, and his stepfather performing some sort of quote ritual. He thinks now this was some sort of voodoo performance, as he would later, find out that a young virgin boy apparently has the strongest King Delta power. Whatever that means, I don't know. This was Louisiana, and they're big voodoo enthusiasts over there. But another horrific thing that Victor recants was being tied to a chair with electrical lines underneath his legs, and he was placed in front of a TV playing something so horrific that I don't even feel comfortable saying. Like, people who know me know that sometimes I got pretty loose lips. I am not saying what he was forced to watch. Like, it's just horrible. You can find the interview somewhere. But probably just look up Victor Marx Project Bluebird and it'll come up. But he was sat down on his chair, forced to watch this, and the electrical lines running underneath his legs. And every time he tried to look away or close his eyes, he would be shocked. And it was done long enough to sort of break his will down, to just totally destroy any willpower that he had to not watch something that no human period should be subjected to. You shouldn't be forced to watch what Victor had to at such a young age. And this was happening to a bunch of MKUltra victims. He'd also be forced to watch a corpse being dismembered in a morgue. He was dunked in a tub, until he would pass out, and alongside all sorts of other horrible abuses over a 4-year span. This happened really until he was 3.5 to 7.5 about. And every time it would happen, he was threatened that if he told anybody, that his stepfather would kill him. And there's one thing, I didn't quite write it down, but this was particularly crazy, and this is the last time that his stepfather abused him. I think he was taken away. But he brought him out to this barn, and his stepfather and him, and there was another guy waiting there for him, and it's just sort of this old beat down barn, and the guy had kind of had a second thought, and he said, "Man, like, I really don't want to do this. Like, I can't hurt a kid. I'm not doing anything like this." And the stepfather said, "Oh, it's okay. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything." So then the stepfather sucker punches this dude, tries knocking him out, ties him up to a pole, wakes him back up. When he comes to, he takes Victor, he's 7 at this time, and says, "Okay, you're going to shoot him. You're going to shoot him or I'm going to shoot you." And so his stepfather puts the revolver in his hand and holds it up and puts Victor's finger over the trigger, so they're both kind of in the slot, and makes Victor pull the trigger. And he left saying, "Well, now you got one confirmed kill. And if you ever tell anybody that I did this, I'm going to bury you and dismember you like I did that guy," basically. Just horrific stuff. Now, I don't know if that was something that was common among MKUltra patients, but the fact that it happened to Victor, and Victor underwent all sorts of MKUltra experiments, is I think a sign in that direction. Not you see him today, and from what I've seen, he seems like a normal guy just trying to live a normal life. But all those horrible things happened to him during that time, and I can't imagine undergoing it, period, but particularly as a child. Now, these are the tests that will be conducted on individuals over and over and over again, adults and children, with the goal of pushing them to their limits to snap their minds and create Manchurian candidates. Oh my gosh, jeez, that sucks. that really sucks. Another MKUltra project involving children was the Children's International Summer Village, which was a summer camp for kids, which was project number 103 in 1959. There was an investigator sent there to study how children communicate without a common language. This investigator was given CIA money by a front organization, meaning he had no idea that this money was from the government, and he thought he was conducting clean science. The real purpose of it, however, this is so ridiculous, was to establish relationships with young foreign nationals who might be of interest to the government in the future. These are kids going to a summer camp, and the CIA is already trying to get a foot in the door with them so they can make them Manchurian candidates in the future. So if you have a Vietnamese kid and we get into another conflict with Vietnam, you can send him over there and assassinate their, I don't know if they've got a president or prime minister or whatever. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Now, of course, none of this was enough. None of it. The LSD wasn't enough. The physical and psychological torture wasn't enough. They just had to go further. Dr. Jose Delgado, he was a professor of neuroscience at Yale. He implanted electrodes in the brain of a bull. Now, there are videos of this on YouTube that you can find where he's standing in front of said bull in the ring with his red blanket, and as he waved the blanket, the bull would run towards him, he'd charge forward, ready to strike, and then Delgado would push a button, and the electrodes in the brain of the bull would snap, they would fire, and the bull would just be shocked into just idling. And he had complete control over this bull. And this, of course, was a state-funded experimentation at Yale. There's another story of a similar test being done on a flamboyant man at Tulane University, which I won't talk about here, given its let's just say zest and spice, but you can find it pretty easily if you go looking. And this was also going to be part of the UCLA Violence Project, where they would place these electrodes in the brains of sex offenders and track them and demobilize them if they go to any area where they would be able to abuse anybody. But that project was ultimately scrapped. However, the overall testing would continue. Timothy McVeigh. The man who conducted the Oklahoma City bombing, he would be taken to a nearby Air Force base. Tell me if you've heard that one before. After being arrested, where he claimed a computer chip would be taken out of his buttocks. I'm not making that up. He would then later speak with, guess who? Jolly West, his psychiatrist. Well, isn't that interesting? This really, really, really makes you wonder what other tragedies, everything from mass shootings to bombings to other domestic terrorist events, were the result of MKUltra experimentations, particularly in more recent years, perhaps. Especially when you say, oh, well, look at that. Who's that Middle Eastern terrorist leader that we eventually took out but was a former CIA asset? Isn't that interesting? Or you look at how, like, the Dalai Lama was a CIA asset. The CIA, was it the CIA or the FBI? I don't know. One of them gave him a bunch of guns way back in the 60s and was like, hey, defend yourself. That's kind of funny. But Dr. Delgado, the one who conducted these tests in the bull, would say the following. We need a program of psychosurgery and political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically modified. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of a liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electrically control the brain. Someday armies and generals will be controlled by electrical stimulation of the brain. Wow. Holy cow. So now I think this is a good place to talk about how this impacts us today, really. Like I mentioned earlier, we know that some of this same testing is still happening in Guantanamo Bay, for example, which even if those people are dangerous criminals, this is still cruel and unusual punishment, to say the least. A lot of these torture methods are still going on, and they really branch into like cultural shame and like just crazy, horrific, stuff like that. But the end goal is really a population under mind control, where they found electronic stimulation to be the most fruitful means to this end. You'll find, official records saying, oh, we thought MKUltra was a whole waste of time because we never found a true serum and we couldn't find a way to control people's minds with drugs. Well, the electronic stimulation certainly has something to say about that. Now, does that ring a bell to anybody else? Electronic stimulation of the brain? This make anybody else wonder if Neuralink is, state funded at all? Maybe under like, even hidden by like some, say, maybe fake angel investor who like, I don't know, just who said, hey, Elon, I like this idea. Why don't you go take this money and investigate a little more with it? I can't prove that at all. But if you looked at my Instagram story when I said that the script was finished, I had a little tab open intentionally that said, is Neuralink state funded? I wouldn't really be surprised because Elon, I think, does get government money openly because of the way, I don't remember what setup he has going on, but I think that's a huge criticism of him, that he takes state money. So it really could be state funded, like on a technicality. But we do know things like, say, Call of Duty and war games like that are funded by the State Department to make, war seem cool. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Top Gun was state funded too. Top Gun is my favorite propaganda movie. Seriously, though, I would be willing to bet that there are some serious connections here between Neuralink and MKUltra mind control efforts, really. Another one, I know this is kind of broad, but just the internet in general, I would say specifically social media. Now, we know that the creation of the internet is a direct result of a military search engine that just got kind of expanded into public use, and we know like the government really runs Tor, which is your access to the dark web and all that sort of thing. But with like social media, for example, it's changed a lot of our interpersonal relationships in ways that I don't think we're ever going to come back from. Which really changes how our minds develop over time. Take, for example, how like 20 years ago, you couldn't possibly expect to have immediate contact with somebody, whenever, wherever. But now it's practically the norm. kind of brief side tangent. I was talking to one of my buddies about this. His girlfriend was getting mad at him because like he wouldn't respond to her while he was working, like because he's working. And I've gone through that in the past too. We're like, why wouldn't you respond to me? I'm working. I'm busy. What do you expect? But even with like notifications, I hate notifications. Like every time I get a buzz, no matter if I'm having a conversation with a friend on Instagram, the notifications would annoy me. So I have notifications turned off for everything. It kind of turns you into like a Pavlovian dog. That's what notifications really are like. So, if people need immediate contact me, they have my phone number, and I'll get buzzed for. But, if someone retweets something I tweeted that is stupid, I'm not going to get notified for it, or, whatever. It probably does have profound impacts on, well, we know it has profound impacts on us. To what extent exactly isn't necessarily clear at this point, but whether or not this is being used as the ripe breeding ground as it is, to influence the way children now even start thinking about things, and as they develop their minds, is really going to cause a bunch of damage, and I think could be the result of government experimentation. And I don't know, you also see like undercover CIA agents online that sometimes get caught, but also sometimes are talking to high school kids like, hey, do you want this gun and go like commit an act of terrorism, go do violence? That happens. That happens. I don't know how deep into the weeds I want to get into this on this podcast, but that happens. Go look it up. It happens. The CIA is complicit in a lot of these things. Oh my gosh. Anyway, you could probably argue that something like when the ATF raided the Branch Davidians in Waco and they were playing like dolphin noises and mating and shining lights in their building at night, that was also some sort of like MKUltra psychological torture event. That's crazy to think about. But all in all, the CIA stands by the story that they never really found a solution to mind control, but rather just ended up torturing a bunch of people and getting away with it. At least that's what we can find in the documents that weren't destroyed. But anyways, what else do you think could have been the result of these horrific tests conducted by our federal government? Any stories that I missed? There's a lot of stuff I couldn't cover because MKUltra is such a broad topic that I tried to find things that I hadn't seen other people talk too much about or too at length about, because you can look up MKUltra and a billion videos are going to come up on YouTube. But if there are any stories in particular that you like, comment them. I'd love to know. I'm always looking for new information on MKUltra, and knowing how the pattern has gone, I'm gonna see some big story that is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't talk about that. That would have made for so much better content. Oh my gosh. Anyway, make sure to like this video, even if you hated it. You might have. Subscribe, even if you hate me. You probably do. And go follow my Instagram at negativespace.pod to be part of the top 1% of coolest and hottest individuals on this earth. That is a fact. I don't make the rules. It's just how it is. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am going to conduct mind control experiments on all of you, really, to get you to like this podcast, and for it to be good. But that's it for now. I love you. Goodbye.